witness that says, I saw her do this, we have like evidence of something that proves that this person is involved in that crime, and that is probable cause is like some kind of evidence that says to us without it that this person was the person who committed the crime, then that gives us the right to place you under arrest.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for being willing to be here and kind of entering this space where you're being challenged. It really does mean a lot to us for you to do so. I would say I got a couple of questions, one relating to body-worn camera. I've worked in discovery for body-worn camera, and as far as I'm aware, there's a couple of different ways that the camera's turned on, either manually or if running occurs, the officer falls, or there's loud shots. My first question is, are there any disciplinary actions that occur for an officer who does not turn on their body-worn camera going into a situation knowing something's about to happen? So we've had situations where we don't have footage of the context and it's an ugly investigation. Secondly, I do think a big part of this conversation has been racial bias, what that looks like. And while I don't think any of us here are looking to be accusatory in any way, we all have an understanding that there are subliminal, subtle aspects that we can be influenced with bias. So even those with the best intentions may have that amount of bias. And we see that when it comes to cases of extreme action on the part of police officers using force, generally they tend to be somewhat of a minority, and we're trying to figure out why that is. So my question there is, what type of safeguards are being continuously put in place to protect against that bias that may leak in and affect how an officer conducts themselves? Are there continuous trainings? Is there some type of something in place that helps with that? So yeah, first question around disciplinary action, body-worn camera. Second question, safeguards for bias.
So I'll speak for the Sheriff's Office. In terms of body camera, just like any piece of technology, it takes a little bit to get used to. So our policy is written that it shall be used. However, since it's new, there has been a little bit of growing pains with that. Now, again, for the Sheriff's Office side, a supervisor is responsible to review their subordinates and the people that they're responsible for their body cameras. And they have to review a certain number each month for each person. It's an A, make sure that they're turning it on and not turning it off, and that they're not muting it. In fact, we actually just had to change the way our body camera system muted because we had kind of an ongoing issue of we would hit mute to have a officer-to-officer conversation, and then we would forget to unmute when we would go back into contact with that person. So now our cameras don't just stay muted, they only stay muted if we actively hold the button. So again, it's technology, it's growing pains, and we're slowly getting better at it. And the company that we went with, I was part of the testing process for body cameras, so there was a lot of input that they got from line level of what we wanted. So kind of like you were speaking of, some of the automated part of it is huge, and it makes our job a lot easier. So with our body cameras, if our overhead lights are activated and our car door opens, the camera starts recording, which is a huge thing because that can be like, oh, last minute, I need to reach down here when my focus should be somewhere else at that point. And then if you start running, you have to run fast enough for it to start recording. And then laying down is another activation as well. So we have to be really conscious, again, growing pains, that like the exterior vest that I wear that has my body camera. And have you guys seen what they look like on our uniform? Okay, so I saw some notes, so I'll just kind of show it here. So see there's a circle here in my uniform. So that's the body camera. And it is literally a cell phone that clips into the uniform like this. So it's actually a cell phone just with body camera software on it. We can't use it for any other cell phone purposes. And then I have a remote. I choose to carry it down in my belt because I don't have enough space up here, and I don't like to wear two watches essentially. So I think, does that cover your first question for the Sheriff's Office?
Yeah, so I'll expand on the body camera. So for CSPD, yeah, there are disciplinary actions if officers aren't having the body cameras on. We investigate that. One of the things we found is there was a few growing pains with body cameras. At first, I mean, I was all for body cameras. There was a few people like, I don't have body cameras. I'm like, why? If you're doing the right thing, it's gonna show you're doing the right thing. And that's what we found with body cameras. And you can see the data nationwide. The cops that have the body cameras on are doing the right things, right? So we encourage everybody. And actually, our policy now is you have to have it on when you have your contact with community members. So we have a lot of fail-safes. So if the officer forgets to turn them on, they turn on. If you start running, they turn on. If there's if you're yelling, they can turn on. If you're opening your car door with lights on, we can actually now we're working on technology where if it's like a call of a shooting, if the cops went into the vicinity, we could put a geofence, and the cameras would actually turn on as the cops come in. We can turn other people's cameras on, so if we see our cops going out there, we can turn them on remotely for that. So that kind of helps prevent that. Because sometimes you don't think, you're like, oh, I forgot to turn it on. But now we're finding most of the cops will have it on, and we actually took the mute system. We did the same thing, and we found that people were muting it to talk. Well, why do you need to mute it, right? You probably, anything you're saying should be, I always tell my cops, anything you're saying, should be respectful, should be held accountable. That's okay if you have a conversation. So we took that mute function away, so people can't just leave it muted, because the worst thing was when I was reviewing an officer's body camera and somebody made a complaint, I believe the citizen, the community member over the officer, if I didn't see there was no audio. I'm like, well, there's no audio, so how can I say that you didn't do this, right? And so we have a really high standard for my officers, and I think we need to. And then speaking about the point about bias, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a question people are afraid to ask, right? It's a question that makes people feel comfortable. And it's a question my cops feel comfortable with. Everybody grows up in a different set of circumstances. Everybody grows up hearing different things from their family, from society. We have biases. And if we don't acknowledge that, we're making a huge mistake. So one of the things we do with my mindfulness training is talking to the cops about, when you're in a situation, are you acting on the person's behavior or are you acting on how they look? Think about that and question that. Because are you acting on the facts of the case, in the behavior they're doing, or is it based on something else? And so, because there's people that come from all over. So we do have bias-based training, police training. We get in the academy every year. We get it. We continue to update it. The state has a standard. We exceed that standard in CSPD because we understand that if we don't have these conversations with cops, we're gonna be in these situations where other communities are in. Where you see this just unjust policing, right, by other communities. So that's why it's hard when people come here. They're like, how can I trust you? I came from Chicago. I came from St. Louis. And that was, right, we saw some negative practices there. So we do discuss that. We have ongoing training, and I can't say we're getting it right, but I hope we are. But I think as long as we're talking about it. And if one of my officers feels uncomfortable in the training, good, because then you're growing. So we have to understand in each situation. A lot of times as supervisors too, after a call, we'll come back and we'll say, what were you thinking? What was going on in that call? Did you treat this person the same as you would treat this person if I'm not treating somebody from the Broadway, treating somebody from the Southeast? If we're not, that's a question we need to ask ourselves. Why aren't we? Maybe this isn't the profession for us. Is that going to answer your question? So yeah, I think it's a great question. It's going to really take serious. And we'll continue to work on it, and we'll continue to make our cops feel comfortable because it's important for us.
Can I add to your, and I'll add something to it real quick.
So we're post-certified in the state of Colorado as police officers, and we have to have a certain amount of training every year to maintain that certification. And part of that training every year is a bias training.
Aside from training now, this position that we have, we interact with people on a daily basis. So if you can imagine, after interacting with a lot of different people, you kind of start noticing different things about when you're reacting with people. Often after a call for service, if you see us going car to car, it's either because we're debriefing the call for service. Call for service is when anybody calls 911 or they call the non-emergency number and they ask us to go out there and investigate something. So afterwards, we'll get together and we'll kind of talk about what happened on that call. And this is just my personal experience, because that's the rule, right, about what I know. So what I noticed being a police officer is that, for example, I would go to a disturbance that involved domestic violence, and I would be interviewing a victim. And at some point, I could kind of feel myself getting like frustrated or annoyed and whatever. And then, I'm trying to conduct an interview. And then afterwards, my partner, because I have a partner, we work in teams, says, hey, I could notice it, your tone changed a little bit, your body language, what's going on with that? Reality was, I grew up in domestic violence, and that's how I made contact with police officers growing up. And I thought, going into a call for service, that I would probably be upset with like the perpetrator, and actually I had issues with the victim, right? So these were my own biases coming up that I had to address, and I had to identify them and be like, holy smokes, why am I getting emotional about this? Why am I like, what's going on? And so we actually, because we are people and we grow and develop, and as we grow and develop in our own craft and our own profession, a lot of us actually realize it based on the experiences we have on our calls for service. Not that we're not doing things right, that's not what I'm saying, but it takes my partner to say, hey, what's going on here? We are, and it's cultural, it really is, it's not just the training, we identify it. Whenever you guys decide to go into whatever organization you're going to go to, you will find that you will choose the one that aligns with your own personal values and your own personal beliefs, because you can't live two separate lives, right? So it's super difficult. This is just my experience to kind of like bring, and then we get training on it, and then you're like, it's like going to therapy and being like, oh my God, that's exactly what I was experiencing. You just articulated it for me. At least that's kind of like, I didn't grow up with therapy and stuff like that. I'm the youngest of the kids, I talk to my cousins, you know what I mean? So stuff like that. So on a personal level, that kind of plays into our role as well. I hope that answers part of your question.
I want to add a bit to that too. So I want to address your question about anti-bias as well. As I mentioned earlier, I've been with the Colorado Springs Police Department for like the last 20 years. One of the things I remember as a young police officer was food for thought coming into our agency and saying, hey, you guys need to have these conversations about bias and race and culture. And I would go to a room and I would be the only person of color in the room. That was the early on CSPD. Things that I've seen over the last few years, one of them is kind of interesting to me, is like our community-oriented policing. So community-oriented policing said, well, go out and know your neighborhood, go out and know your beat. So now you have this police officer that went out and tried to get to know the people there. Let me see who's in the neighborhood and have conversations with them. And we continue to evolve. The next thing that I see in there, and I'm gonna jump hugely, I'll actually move back. For a while there, while I was an instructor at the training academy, I was our anti-bias instructor at the training academy, and we went out to various community groups, and we would bring a panel of people into our training academy, brand new police officers, haven't touched the street yet, and the panel would include African American, Native American, Asian, Middle Eastern individuals, everybody, as many people as we could find in our Colorado Springs community that wanted to have a conversation with our police department, bring them in and we'd have a panel. And we would let the panel share from their perspective, and we would let the police officers ask. More evolution. We got to, I'll go back just to last year or the year before with the illumination circles. We started going out to, again, different community groups of different nationalities and backgrounds, and having conversations that we can understand. And it was the police officers, who want to know, who want to learn, going out to those communities. The thing that I'm excited about right here is now I really feel like we're having more of a dialogue. A lot of it was police talking to themselves, police talking to the community, the community talking to us. And now I feel like we're getting to a place where we're having more dialogue together with different groups. And that's one of the things that I've really appreciated about the Colorado Springs Police Department over the years.
All right, so I have a question from a friend of mine who had to leave a little bit ago, and her question was, hold on, let me read this. The culture we surround ourselves with influences our actions and plays a role in the perceptions we have about our actions. Is there a culture of accountability in the CSPD? And how do you hold each other accountable for your actions, especially if they don't always reach the public or your higher-ups? And then I have my own personal question. Colorado Springs is one of the few places that the military sends individuals with disabled family members. So we have a higher concentration of disabled community members. Does CSPD and does the El Paso County Sheriff's Office receive specialized training on how to deal with people who might not necessarily respond to those verbal interactions with you properly, so that situations don't escalate in the instance that somebody is disabled?
Okay, so I would have to ask you to repeat the first question to see if I can answer it. I'm not sure if I would be, so I'll kind of go off the second one for right now. So part of our crisis intervention training includes disabilities, because like Sergeant Newton kind of explained earlier, a mental health crisis doesn't mean that somebody is specifically diagnosed with something. They are just in some sort of crisis that is prohibiting them from either understanding what the situation is going on, or they're just really upset, really mad. All human emotions, and it's okay to feel that way. And so part of the CIT training is really reinforcing that and understanding that we're gonna contact people with disabilities and what we might expect from that and how to respond with that. And I just wanna highlight that we've actually just created a partnership with the Resource Exchange, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that community organization, but they specifically work with community with intellectual delays and disabilities, and we sponsor one of their break time events. So we get paired one-on-one with disabled kids, and that's just one of the ways that we reach out specific to that community. Just again, small things that we can do.
And can I just, yeah. And with one thing the community may not know is that you could also call the department, like the Colorado Springs Police Department or the Sheriff's Office, and you can call our dispatch center, and you can give them information about people in your household. It's called Be on the Lookout. It's a BOLO. And what you would say is, this is my address. If you get a call for service at my address, this individual may have autism, Alzheimer's, they may have PTSD, something, so that when we get that information and we're going to that address, we know that there is somebody, we know their name, we know their age, we know what they look like, we know what they are suffering with, medications, anything like that, to give us more information. Because on our way to a call for service, in our heads, we are kind of like, okay, if this happens, I may have to do this, but if that happens, I might have. So we're kind of planning what we're going to do when we get there, right? So that we can kind of like de-escalate the situation. So if you don't know that, that's also something that you can do to help us have more information when we're going out to help you with whatever's happening.
Go back to your first question, but let me finish. So, as I talk about crisis intervention training, we teach guys how to de-escalate situations. Maybe I ask you a question, you respond to it very aggressively and upset. That's okay, right? And I teach my cops that that's okay. Somebody may have frustration. I had a citizen that, had a few little mental disability, but he came from St. Louis. He came here, and he's never had a good interaction with police. And he's a black man, and he comes up and he's like, just starts screaming and yelling, and my cop's like, getting like tense, I'm like, just relax, man, just listen. And after that, we've never had a complaint from him ever again. He's always had great interaction with the cops, because we learn how to deal, and we learn how to talk to each other. Because he's like, you guys aren't like the other cops, and so that's what we teach our cops, to kind of sit back and listen and be mindful, right? And that's why that mindfulness is extremely important. And we also have specific teams created, our community response teams. It's a a medic, a counselor, and a police officer all ride together. So if we know the call comes in and it's a mental health crisis, we can actually send that specific team. So maybe a cop's not the best person to address it. Maybe it's a counselor that's the best person to communicate with that person that's going through that crisis. And those teams are extremely valuable. I think the more resources we get, the more cops we get, I guarantee we'll create more of those teams, because they are hugely impactful and helpful. And I think your first question, going back, is talking about accountability and how we hold people accountable. So, we've kind of addressed this a few times. I believe in holding people accountable. Everybody in our department believes in that. And I can tell you a personal story. And so if you even Google my name, you'll probably find it still. I arrested a cop in Oregon I went to the academy with. He was breaking into his house and he was drunk driving, right? And he was breaking into his ex-girlfriend's house. You know that everybody's like, well, it must have been a hard decision for you. I'm like, no, this dude has committed a crime. I don't care if he wears the same uniform as me. He's tarnishing my name, my reputation. So one of the first things I asked when I transferred here from Portland, Oregon, I came here and I took a ride along. I said, what do you do if you have a cop that's doing wrong, or let's say it's a cop that's being inappropriate or committing a crime, and the officer I was riding was like, well, we arrest him and we kick him out of our department and we make it publicly known that we did that. And I was like, right answer. And that cop was Tommy Stevens. He doesn't work here anymore, but I learned a lot from that. And Deidre actually recruited me for here. And that was one of the reasons I picked CSPD. And I would never have come to an agency that wouldn't hold themselves accountable, because every time that somebody tarnishes its reputation, or does something wrong, it tarnishes our badge. And so anytime even somebody says, hey, he was rude to me, we open an investigation into that. We look into that. We analyze that. I'm not afraid to hold people accountable. You know, I think there used to be a culture in some agencies that were afraid to hold people accountable and have that difficult conversation. I will look down. I don't care if you wear the same uniform as me. If you're not doing right to the community, this is not the profession for you. And I've told cops that. And thankfully, we don't see that very much anymore, because people don't. They know when they come into this organization, if you do wrong, we'll be accountable. But I think we have to, right? Because you guys trust us with your lives. So, does that answer your question? Thank you.
I guess what I really want to know is, with situations like Devon Bailey and similar cases, how many body shots does it really take for the police to feel comfortable that they've handled the situation? Like, with some of these cases, I'm like, did it really take that many, you know?
No, it's a good question. You know, it's a hard question for us to answer, right? So what we train for is to train if somebody's creating a threat, to stop that threat. And we never know. It's not like the movies. When somebody gets hit by a bullet, they actually just don't go right down. It's kind of inaccurate. And so what we do is we teach our cops to keep analyzing the situation. You know, if you fire a weapon and you reassess and that situation is ended and that person's down, or there's no other threat, you need to immediately move to something else. Or let's say if I'm using a taser and it's not working and the guy's still fighting, well, clearly it's not working. You need to move to something else. You need to readdress the situation. So we never know, right? We don't know the situation. And sometimes people get really, oh my gosh, there was 30 shots fired, but it was 3 seconds. And it was like 7 cops on scene, and they're all seeing things differently. And I would, you know, but those are really hard questions to answer. But I do say every time we pull that trigger, it's a really hard decision, and a decision I hope I never have to make. I have been involved in shooting situations. Thankfully, I've never had to fire my weapon. Like I said, the majority of our cops never fire their weapon in their profession. But you know, it's definitely a difficult situation, and there are certain situations like, and once we're involved in shooting, like I said, we train our cops to render aid. So we want them to switch, and that's one of the reasons why we teach them to be present in the moment, to switch to that caretaking method, because our job is to save that person's life if we do use force.
Okay, well, I guess my question is relating to hers, about how we justify that the man got shot 8 times. Correct? I mean, it just seems like, you know, the department in charge of protecting us, I mean, how do we trust that they're gonna protect us if things like this continue to happen? You know, how do we as a community combat against like a system that is for decades racially biased? As you know, like what do we do against that as a people?
So, help me out, because I think I heard 3 questions. So just help me out. So your first question is, how do we justify a death?
Justify that a man got shot 8 times, and that was like the correct use of force.
We don't justify somebody losing their life, but we grieve it. A life is important.
Right, but it's still
we don't. I'm answering for myself, right? That's how you want it. I cannot answer for other officers. That is not my place. I can tell you about our training, I can tell you about my experiences, but we don't justify, we grieve it. And I'm not trying to argue with you. I think trust and trusting us that what you are giving us authority to do is very difficult. I think the difficult part is trying to explain to you that the authority that we have to take somebody's life is overwhelming, and that we are mindful and we think about it. And for us to make that decision is very serious, and we do not abuse that authority. We hold it in reverence. Because if we have to make that decision, we're doing it to protect the community and to serve it. And some of the decisions that we make are unpopular. And that's why you are allowing us to do what we do. We go through a very rigorous background check, we go through a lot of rigorous training, but we do it because we said, nobody wakes up in the morning saying, I hope I have a bad day. I hope I experience an emergency, trauma, something awful in my life. But I went to my department and said, Chief Nesky, if you hire me and if you train me, I promise you I will help that person navigate through that day. And I will do the best that I can, and I will get them to the next level, because I love the community and I want to serve the community. So I don't think I have maybe they have a better answer for you. For me personally, the reason that I serve the community is because of what the community has given me. And because I believe in family. I come from family, that's my background, and so this is why I serve. But those are great questions. Those are philosophical questions that we all sit down and we talk about, and we share with each other, and we discuss them on a daily basis. So it's not that we're not thinking about it, we think about them all the time. When you put on a uniform, you don't know what type of decision you're gonna make that day.
So I'll kind of add on to that. So a use of deadly force is a use of deadly force no matter the amount of bullets. Does that kind of help? Like when we're making a decision to use our firearm, we're making that decision to use deadly force based on the circumstances.
It's just like, I mean, it was one time and then 8 times. So I guess like, we're not a part of the police department, so how do we move on past?
How do I comfort? I think she's trying to say.
And trust again. As
Yeah,
you
so,
pointed out.
and that's an incredibly difficult thing to be dealing with. And kind of like my partners here have said, a death occurred, nobody on our agencies are celebrating that. We never celebrate when a death has occurred. None of us want to be involved in anything taking up a life, because that's the hardest decision that we have to make as a police officer. And frankly, we'd rather not be involved in that. But when we do have to make that decision, we have to go off the information that we had. And kind of how we mentioned earlier, our training is based off of state law and it's based off of federal law. So we don't just make the rules up ourselves. So if you guys want change on the way that police officers act, and the rules that we have to follow and the procedures that we have to follow, that's gonna come from the activism that he was speaking of earlier. So the people that you elect to choose to represent you, all of those processes are what make change. When there's justices making those Supreme Court decisions, they go off of what society has changed. And that's how major landmark changes have come, is because society has deemed that the change needs to occur and the Supreme Court supports that.
And just like you kind of said, how do we start moving on? Was that your question, right? I
And
think-
trust.
And trust. I think this is a great start. I think you being honest and telling us when this happened, this is how I felt, us acknowledging those feelings and getting to know why and why you're feeling that. I think it's important for you to share and be honest with us about what you're feeling. You'd be surprised how many times we go out for a call for service and we talk to people about the stress involved in their daily life, and sometimes we just stand there and people scream at us for a long time and they just need to vent. I think you being honest and telling me I'm angry at your organization for this is important. I think me listening is important. I think me acknowledging it is important. I think us talking about it is important. I think it's okay for you to put me in an uncomfortable position and tell me what you're going through, because I serve you and I want to understand how I serve you better. And then we start talking more and more. And the more we talk, maybe we can get a little bit more comfortable in trying to like move a little bit forward. I think it might be a little slow in the beginning, but I think it's worth it to start off a little slow so we can get to the end.
So ladies, I want to tell you that I really do appreciate you sharing your emotions with us. Being an African American female here in Colorado Springs, I am concerned for my family, my friends, my cousins. You know, I am. This is the color of my skin, and it goes all out there. One of the things that I think that we have to do, one, culturally, we have to recognize that, yes, police and African Americans have had a long history of violence, and we acknowledge that. It continues to be a part of our fabric, of our cultural fabric. And in acknowledging that, it makes our emotions even more intense when we see that the violence still continues. And it makes us grieve more, grieve longer, have harder conversations with our families, right? Because we have to tell them that this is a possibility. That, you know, every time we see it in social media, it is a thing in social media that is always out there for the news to gather. The news looks and says, oh, black man, white man, conflict, black person dies, right? And every time you see it, it stirs up that cultural emotion behind it, and it is hard and it is ugly, okay? So I am 100% right there with you. It is hard and ugly. Even wearing this badge, I don't want to see it. I don't want to feel it. The way I get through it is I recognize my emotions behind it. I have to. You are huge for being able to stand in front of a crowd and be able to express it. That's getting that out there helps to start that dialogue. It helps to start that personal healing. So we have to do that. In all kinds of loss of, you know, through death, in all kinds of loss of trust of the people that you say are here to protect us. It takes time to, you know, and I know you've heard that, right? It takes that time for us to process, but we also have to, we go through that time to process our emotions, but we also have to look for ways that we can channel those emotions in the right direction. Being here is a great way to channel those emotions in the right direction. Being here and being able to look for a solution, to be open to a solution, is huge. And again, I tell you for myself, one of the ways that I got through it was I became a police officer, right? Becoming a police officer gave me an inside step, an inside look to one of those things that we fear. What is behind this badge? Being there and being able to see that these are just human beings, just like I am, gave me a little bit more power. Being there and being able to have a conversation with other police officers to say, was that the right thing? Was that the best thing? As many of you have said around, to hold people accountable. I feel that sometimes if my face isn't in the group, then how are they going to look? Are they going to be accountable? Are they going to hold themselves accountable? Knowing that there's my face there to see this. Social media gives us that a little bit more too, right? The body-worn cameras gives that a little bit more too. That transparency, that openness, that somebody's actually looking and paying attention. being a police officer also helps me to have the difficult conversations with my coworkers. You know, we talk cultural. I say, hey, you know, did you understand that taking your shoes off was the right thing to do? Did you understand that not, you know, addressing only the man in this type of household is the right thing to do? We have to have those difficult conversations. You have to, for me, getting inside was a way to help. What it also does is it gives me an ear to my community. So when I hear your pain, when I hear that there's stress, I can take that into this law enforcement group too and say, these people are hurting, we are hurting, we want to help you, we want to be concerned, we want to change, grow, train, anti-bias training as much as we can. So we acknowledge our pain, we give it some time, we work on finding a constructive way to give back. It doesn't always come easy, and sometimes the community needs to reach out to us. I always tell folks to come in and go on ride-alongs with us, get to know these people so that we can both continue our relationship conversation back and forth. I apologize for being a little long.
Oh, no, that's okay. Hey, this is the lightning round, so I want to get all the remaining questions because I want to make sure that we get to every question. Yeah, so we're going to go across, just ask your question, and then try to commit that to your memories, and then you're going to come back. So go ahead, ask your question.
With policies and procedures in your departments, in what way is the community involved with crafting those? And if not, could they be involved in crafting those to feel like they have control over building a bridge between the communities?
Okay,
Okay,
so
we're gonna ask another one. Or-
who had a question? Oh, right, Connie, I'm sorry. I'll come to you, right?
So, you know, we do ask for community partners all the time. So we were just sitting yesterday with the chief, with the steering committee. So we're meeting with the community partners, people in the community represented all over, trying to understand better ways, better practices to do things. One of the big ways that we ask our community to come in and be engaged, and we take a lot of that feedback, is through our community academies. So we do one for Spanish speakers, like I said earlier, and we do one for that. And what we do is we kind of take you through what a cop goes through and what we do in our agency and how policies are crafted. And we think about, hey, do you guys have any feedback, input for us? So part of that community academy is we actually take citizen or community members, their concerns, and say, maybe we're not doing things, maybe there's some better way to do things, right? Because we all come from different backgrounds, we're all thinking about things differently. So a good way to get involved, if you go and visit us, and I know it's hard to go to like a CSPD's Facebook page or website, but if you go to our website, this is kind of community relations, and you'll see different ways to be involved. And we really are concerned about that feedback and taking that. And one of the other options is we have the Illumination Project. And so what the Illumination Project is, we started this actually prior to Devon Bailey. So this has been going on because we knew something like this could happen in our community, right? We knew that there's going to be a situation that kind of tensions, everything kind of boils and comes over the top. So we started the Illumination Project 3 years ago, and what that does is we invite community members to engage in these types of conversations. But they're not just conversations, they're actually action. So we ask what things we can do. So if you have ideas, give them to us. The next one is going to be March 10th at 6 p.m. to 8. It's at Chapel Hills Mall in the event center. We hold them all over the community. We don't hold them at police facilities on purpose because we want people to invite us into their community. The last one was held at Harrison High School. So those things, the community feedback on policies, procedures, or things that we can do, we actually take that and we sit down and we try to figure out new ways of doing business. Because if we stay stuck and we keep doing things like we've always done, we're going to have these issues again, right? So we have to progress. We have to change with the community. And if we're just saying we're going to draft everything ourselves and we're going to think we know what the best, that's just not accurate, right? We don't know what's best. Our community and us together as a team moving forward, that's how we do this. So I invite you to come to some of those listening projects. This information will be taken back and shared with our deputy chiefs, our command staff. So I literally write down the office from them. So I share these feedback your concerns, and then we think about, maybe we're not doing these things right, maybe there's something we can change, and our policies are changing all the time based on community input, right, and input from statewide too, and nationwide.
So that was kind of my question, but kind of not. So I feel like when you get feedback from community and then you still craft the procedures alone, that doesn't give the community power. If the community is involved in your processes and your procedures, kind of like California does with all of their people, and you're at the table crafting those procedures together right then and there, and that's what they use, that gives the community power. When you're still taking it away from the community with just feedback that you can either drop or keep, that doesn't really give the community power.
Well, and I understand where you're coming from, and like one of the things is that, right, sometimes we can disagree. And I'm gonna have to disagree because what we do is we do take that information, but we actually bring it back to the community. We bring it back and say, is this what we were looking for? Is this what you were thinking? So that's why we continue to be part of those groups, right? So we're not just taking it and saying, we don't like that piece, we don't like that piece. We're taking it and saying, okay, now we have a new thing. Then we come back to the community. So these lesson sessions are evolving, right? So we come back and say, this is what we've done. Now let's reevaluate it. Because when we craft things with community input, if we don't come back and evaluate it and get it back to the community, then you're right. We're not doing you justice. Where you don't have a say, you lose that power. And so one of the things that we do at CSPD is come back to these listening sessions and we give updates saying, this is the information that you provided us. And actually, you can go on our website, you can see the Illumination Project, and you can see the community impact and what we're doing with that. And so you can actually kind of like audit us, right? To say, are they actually taking my feedback? Are they concerned? And sometimes feedback, it's not practical, we can't do it. But we will come back and let you know that and say in the reasons why. Because I agree with you. If we're not doing that, then you don't feel like you have power, or you just think we're cherry picking, right? So that's not a practice for us of doing that. You know, we're always going to give feedback on if we craft new things, especially through the Illumination Project. I think that's our number one way of getting in contact right now. So hopefully that better answers that question. But I appreciate that follow-up because that was important.
Thank you for being a part of our community as well as one of police force. What do you tell your family members how they should react if they're stopped by the police? This is something I've never had to do. I need to teach my family how to react. I mean, you know, when the police stop, you put your hands on them. I have another question, please.
I will pass this on, but I think it's a question I want to answer too. So my family is this, right? This is my family. This is the makeup of my personal family. So my nephew, I have a question. I explained this to my cousin. I explained this to her young black men. I'm going, and explain that same question to them and saying, we need to be respectful. We need to respect authority. Respect authority. But if there are questions, I do not want you to give up your individual rights. I want you to challenge at an appropriate time. So it's always having that conversation, right? And it's challenging because every community is so different. And so it's important that people like, you hear, I had that talk with my son. Really, you had a talk? Yes, it's extremely important to have those talks, right? How we interact with people and how we get back to interact with each other, because those contacts can be deadly in a second. And that's what we don't want. And that's one of the reasons I trained my cops too. Like, not everybody's coming from the same background that's going to have that same reaction. So maybe you need to take a step back yourself as a police officer and be like, okay, why are they reacting this way? Maybe they grew up in a different system era. So it is a difficult thing, and I'm sure I can pass that on to the panel. They can kind of explain more of how they've done it with their own families. So I think that's what we need to talk about, is our own personal experience as well.
So as a result of the Devon Bailey case, were there any specific trainings that were given to the police forces?
Outside of the anti-bias trainings that we're currently doing, I don't necessarily know that there has been enough time to put together a training that says, respond this way. Is there been anything specific training? Not that I can think of. Coming together in the community and listening to the community and trying to bring that information to our officers and is probably where we are right now in the process. It is still a growing and evolving process. process.
Does the police force also offer resources? This family lost a young man. Someone had to pay for that funeral. The mother, the family is struggling. How do we help them now? Are the resources available that the police force provides to bury this child? Are there ways in to support the family, like therapy or something? How do we get that? Is that available?
I can answer your question in kind of two parts. One, if people are victims of crimes in Colorado, there's a pool of money and there's resources available that help them. We actually have our own victim advocates. In situations like in this case, when they determine, an independent review board determines it's justified or that, they are not eligible for that pool of resources. However, there are also nonprofits in our community, right here in Colorado Springs, that step up to help families with that because there's still a loss of life, right? So it's not provided right from us in the police department, but as a community that I live in, there's other things that we can do as community members, and it's not a police issue. It's a community and police issue. It's a community issue. And so there are grieving families, right? And we're not gonna diminish that. There have been resources that stepped up to help the family pay for those things, to help families of violent crimes pay for that, right? If your son or daughter is a victim of a crime committed by somebody, there's resources for that. So it's really a community question. I think that's a great thing moving forward too. Think about from this type of group. Talk about activism. What can we do moving forward as a community to help people heal? We're never going to get past it. That's going to be something on their heart forever. But what can we do to help? Maybe the financial burden and all that. And that's something that needs to come from the community. And as we need to come together. And I think that's what we, like I said at the beginning, we do too much of, well, is somebody going to do that? Well, we are somebody's in this room. I'm talking right now outside of this uniform. Maybe we as a community come together to help a family out, no matter what family it is. There's been a lot of victims of crime in our community in the last year that haven't had any assistance that we maybe can do as a community. So maybe that's something that we can move forward to talk about and explore even more options as a community group.
I caught the tail end about how you said every situation is assessed. Before everyone moves forward, you assess every point of the situation. I guess with the Devon Bailey situation in particular, my question is there a standard with your escalation of force and your rules of engagement? And how do you guys hold officers accountable to that? Because like just from me seeing the body footage and just watching him running away, just like in every situation, including that one, how do you compare it? And like, how can you say, all right, this guy did this, so did this officer do this right? And if let's say somebody else does another situation, and like, how do you hold your? Because it seems like everything's done in a different way, and depending on who you're dealing with. And I just want to know like, what's the standard, and where can people find these standards? Because like this lady said over here, like giving the community power, I feel like information gives people power. If you would let people access what your rules of engagement are, or what your escalation of force is, and we can at least easily find that information readily, then maybe we can abide by whatever rules are necessary so nobody's gonna die. Or it was kind of mind-blowing to me seeing that, So like I just want to know, what's the standard? Is there a standard? And how do you guys hold yourselves accountable to that standard?
In deference, they addressed that question earlier. So yeah, and I want your question to get answered. So can you go ahead. You can answer this question, and then what I want you to do is follow up with them after we're done, because I'm really big on trying to end that forward. So just answer his question, and then if you could follow up with him.
So in our training, we have what's called a situational force model. Police officers in the middle, they're observing all of the situation that's coming towards them. Police officer is able to use any level of force necessary and reasonable necessary to control and contain the situation. in response to your question, what I'll tell you is, we all focused on the really hard, difficult part where Devon is shot. But if we step back a bit, you can see the level of force used by the officers in there, which was a conversation. Hi, I'm here to talk to you. I want to talk to you about this. I hear that there's a weapon involved. What do we do? What is the standard? Well, we have to respond to what the other individual does. At that particular moment, they could have easily just stood there, and the situation comes out differently, possibly, right? So I think that we have to kind of, like I said, look at the whole situation from start to finish, and not just look at the end result and say, well, that's all on you guys. But I'd like to have a continued conversation.
Yeah, can we do that?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Because I'm at the end of my time, and I know you have a question. And again, if you all could stick around just a little bit, I think there are a couple of people that had a question, and maybe they could get it answered by having a direct dialogue with you. There's one last thing I want to do. Everybody got a sheet of paper. If you don't, we can hand them out. What I want to know, and I want you to write this down, and we'll collect this because I really want this information. We've been talking for just under 2 hours. What do you want to come from this conversation? And again, I really wish we had enough time to talk about it, but we talked about it, and people tell me, Keith, hold these conversations, invite the police, because I want something to happen. What is that something? Can you please write that on a sheet of paper? What do you want to come out of this discussion so that for you can say it was beneficial and it wasn't just we had a conversation and nothing happened? I'm just trying to figure out what do you want happen. A lot of things that people want, I'm not in a position to give. So I'm not the police chief, I'm not the mayor, I'm not a law enforcement officer, I'm not even a community organizer when it comes to policing. And that's not to say that I'm against Black Lives Matter. I just don't think you should take credit for something you're not doing. And I know that there are people out in the communities trying to bring awareness to what the community is feeling in response to law enforcement or something like Devon Bailey. And then I know that law enforcement or people who support law enforcement want something too. Can you please tell me what that something is and put it on your sheet, and then don't forget to fill out your evaluations. I would really appreciate it. Can we give everybody a round of applause? I want to thank law enforcement officers for coming out.